I had doctors telling me, we have no idea what's wrong with you, and trying to diagnose me with all these things from CTE to, maybe it was a stroke to, they were like, oh, maybe it was MS. I just kind of used like fruit and vegetables as like flavoring. Finding the right amount for you is something everyone can do. And I think that right amount is maybe, it's like, I don't know, an apple a day, like the old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I've been eating a pound of ground beef and an apple for the past like 3 years, and I feel fantastic every time I do it. They don't realize how good that they would feel on carnivore. I think restaurants are just legal drug dens. Think of it as, oh, this is just mouth pleasure. I'm just, doing drugs with my friends type of thing. But they think of it as nutrition. We're all on Team Human, and we need to start there.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up though, our spaces are filling up very quickly. Welcome everybody. Today we have with us Matt, who is going to share a success story. So Matt, maybe start out just telling us, if you don't mind, where you're located and a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm from New Fairfield, Connecticut. And yeah, I've been on everyone calls it a health journey, I guess. I've been doing that for, who knows, since I was like 18, on and off, different diets. And there hasn't been a diet that I haven't come across and tried. I mean, besides, the ridiculous ones like the blood type diet, I'm not even sure what that's supposed to mean. But I guess really the biggest thing was I was like, hey, I realized that what you put in your body determines what you get out, put garbage in, get garbage out, that sort of thing. So, I was trying a whole bunch of different things, and I guess we can kind of go back, why I started doing this in the first place. And, I was on this podcast a while, I was saying in too much detail, but yeah, I was experiencing these strange neurological symptoms and, which eventually culminated in I guess the arresting of my speech. It was quite weird. I haven't had anything like that happen since. And it was, I'm pretty sure it was related to a vaccine, but that's just my take on it. But yeah, it was, so I guess trying to figure out what happened there led me down the rabbit hole of all these different diets and whatnot. And, I started with keto because my friend was like, hey, if you eat just meat and cheese, you can lose weight. I'm like, oh, really? Great. So I gave that a try, and, I did lose some weight. I had a little extra weight to lose, and, I was probably about 20 at this point. And so, I was feeling great, one of the other symptoms that I had was brain fog. So that started to go away on keto. And I noticed that the cleaner I would eat, the better I felt. I mean, it's obvious to me now, but it wasn't quite obvious back then. And so, I went from the whole keto thing. I tried every version of keto. I wasn't doing any supplements or anything like that, just food. But I mean, back then I was just eating, whatever packaged food I felt, fit the keto bubble, especially if it said keto, if it said keto, it's for me. But it was, the same thing with vegan. I tried vegan after that because my friend went vegan. So I'm like, wow, he's looking good, feeling good. I'll give that a shot. And then, he was like, hey, why don't you watch The Game Changers? Did that. And yeah, that changed the game, but it wasn't in a positive way. And yeah, vegan was the worst I have felt, honestly. In every single diet that I've tried, vegan was my least favorite. I mean, it was great, like at first.
Why? What was it about it that made you feel the worst? I mean, what kind of things were happening? So
I guess I, quote, felt better. And by feel better, I'm just going off of like my body feel, like what does it feel like to be in my body? And that felt worse on vegan than it did on keto, but both of them felt better than the standard American diet. And, before I started messing with my diet, I was, maybe drinking, I don't know, like whatever the soda I was drinking back then, like a whole 12 rack in a weekend of soda. And I mean, nowadays I won't think twice about doing that with beer, but I mean, that was, that was my problem. I was drinking soda, I was eating Doritos and Oreos. And I thought that if it was food, then that means it was good for me, but really I was just eating for mouth pleasure. So, when you eat for mouth pleasure, you're not going to feel so good because you're going to deviate towards these things that I don't consider food. I don't think Oreos are food just because you can metabolize them and you can keep going. That's not food in my opinion, but it took me like 10 years to get there. So as far as like feeling better, yeah, I felt better when I was doing keto and vegan. I felt better than when I was just eating processed foods. But if you want to talk about actually really feeling good, not, there's when you're eating processed foods, you're below baseline. And then, if you go to a keto or a vegan thing and you get to baseline and then you do something like carnivore, and especially like a clean carnivore, with organs and stuff like that. And, I mean, even experimenting with supplements like creatine. So things like that, like then you sort of get to be above baseline. And so I guess like without describing my body feel, that's how I felt.
Let me go back to because you said you had developed, I guess, an aphasia or an inability to speak, and you said maybe it was associated with some sort of vaccine. Maybe describe that in a little more detail. What was going on? Why do you think it was related to potentially a vaccine?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the only thing that I had to go off of. It was within, I believe it was less than 2 weeks of the Gardasil vaccine. So, it was, and this is not just, my hearsay. I had doctors telling me we have no idea what's wrong with you. And, they were like trying to diagnose me with all these things, from CTE to, maybe it was a stroke to, they were like, oh, maybe it was MS. So all these different things, but it, went through the VAERS process and everything. So they definitely had the, I don't know what happens when you go through the VAERS process, because this was also like, I was maybe like 20 or so when everything finally came to a close. So this is, I just turned 30. So this is a while ago. So I wish I had written all this stuff down to, go tell about it later, but I wasn't thinking, mostly because I was eating such processed garbage that I was in a state where I was able to get a vaccine injury. I think that the whole vaccine injury thing, it comes with, metabolic dysfunction. And you can say, well, why do babies get vaccine injuries? Well, maybe their parents were, metabolically unwell before they had them. And then, what are they feeding them? Maybe they're feeding them formula if they can't breastfeed, which is unfortunate. And I think formula is the first processed food that we all eat. And I think that's what leads to vaccine injuries. So yeah, I think I did have a vaccine injury, but I don't think it was, due to the vaccine per se. I think it was more due to, my state of health at the time, which was garbage.
So when you developed this inability to speak and they said, well, we think it might be this, imaging, blood test, I'm sure neurological testing, what did they suggest you do about it?
They said, and you know what, it was from and nothing against this lady, as she was in the same spot that I was, but the most metabolically unwell doctor I have ever come across. And she was like the final boss. This was like, I finally got to it and she was like, here, this is your plan. She could barely get up out of her chair to, do tests and stuff like that. And she's telling me that I need to be on medications for my entire life. So, immunosuppressants and things like that. So, because, their thought process is, well, your immune system is attacking itself, that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, I don't buy that. And, like not to their face, but I'm like, okay, these people are quacks and I'm going to figure this out for myself, because they clearly have no idea not what they're talking about. Cause like they knew what they were talking about for sure, but I don't think that they had the right information. And so, I rather than be on these drugs, regardless of what I thought about the drugs. I'm like, I could take drugs or I can figure this out for myself. And, then I just started following doctors, honestly. And it was, I think Dr. Berg was my first, and then Ken Berry. And then I didn't discover you for a while until I got into the carnivore thing, but, you were certainly one of them. And, I just basically started following doctors and watching their live streams and things like that. And, hearing other anecdotes of people healing, not even healing, it's just getting back to an optimal state, or even getting to that optimal state for the first time.
When you said you were having trouble speaking, I mean, you couldn't speak at all, or you were just had trouble finding words, or, I mean, what was it? Because you're obviously speaking fine now. What were you, where was the limitation?
So it was weird. I couldn't even write things down. I couldn't articulate in any way. So I could think what I wanted to say, but it was like, like in a dream, you ever had a dream where you go to punch someone in the face and you can't quite do it, and it's slow, and it just doesn't, like, something was like blocking, what I had in my head versus what I wanted to put out into the world. And I'm not quite sure what that is. Neither were they. And I don't know how many doctors I saw, but none of them had a straightforward answer.
So, I mean, how did you communicate? You can't write things down. You can't talk. How are people even know what the hell was going on, other than they just, I mean, how did that go?
They didn't. Yeah, they didn't. And so this happened like a few times leading up to the big event that got my parents to say, hey, we're going to the hospital because this is strange. But like the other ones were sort of like, it wasn't, I couldn't speak. It was the song Under Pressure. I was trying to sing that in my head, like the first time this happened, and it was, and then nothing, just, I couldn't articulate that specific word, but I could say other words to other people. And it was quite strange because, I was working construction at the time. So I would, go up to, I would just, they called it like a garbled speech. And I don't remember exactly what I was saying, but, they were like, what are you, drunk or something like that? I'm like, no. And I had no idea. So this is like the first time that happened, maybe second. First time it happened, I was by myself, and I'm like, this is a bit strange. And I just, I kind of wrote it off as whatever, like maybe I, hung over or something like that. But yeah, the second time it happened, I was with, my foreman at the time, and he was like, are you drunk? You need to, lay down. I'm like, no, I'm good. And then it kind of went away. Maybe 5 minutes, it would show up in like a 5-minute spurts. Oh, now you can't articulate, or now you can't think clearly, that sort of thing. So this happened like 3 or 4 times. And then leading up to, I was about to go out with my friends, living with my parents at the time. So I come downstairs, and, normally I would say, hey, see you later. I'm going out. But instead I said nothing, and I just sat down on the couch because there was a feeling that went along with it. And so I felt the same feeling coming up as the other times, but it was more intense. I'm like, this is not the same thing, not going to be the same amount of intensity. I better go, at least be around somebody. And at that point, I didn't try to talk. It was in, my room alone. And so by the time I went downstairs, I just couldn't articulate at all. And they were like, can you write things down? And my friend was supposed to come pick me up. He came to the house, and I just gave him a thumbs up. And, that was like, I could do things like that. Sure. Like I could. It was the strangest thing that I have ever experienced. But yeah, that lasted. So this is maybe around, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whenever you go out. And then I think I left the hospital at 2 a.m. And then all of a sudden my speech just came back. So, I was like, oh, I can talk now. And it was very strange. And so, the people at the hospital, they're like, I don't know, here, go to some neurologist. So I think I went to a neurologist first, and they're like, we have no idea. We need to scan your brain. So I don't know how many MRIs with contrast I had over the years, but it was, I don't know, maybe 5 more, something like that. All these other neurological tests, and, they just had no idea what it was. And they were like, oh, okay, well, it must be this. So here's your diagnosis wrapped up with a bow, and here's your pills that you have to take for life. So that was that was that. It was all very strange, but nothing like that has happened since. And immediately after they gave me the pills, I didn't take them, but they were like, here's your prescription. I was like, no, thanks. I'll figure it out for myself. And then I started changing my diet around from, cause like I was on keto, sort of like a dirty keto before this happened. So it's not like this made me change my diet, but this made me really deep dive into, okay, maybe it is diet, and how good can I get my diet? And will that have an effect on how I feel? So it turns out it did.
When you were visiting the doc, did they offer you medications? You said you met the final boss, who's you described as kind of a Jabba the Hutt type character, but did you ever go on any medications for any of this stuff?
No, I never took anything. And I never really liked taking medications anyway. In fact, I wasn't 18 at the time, so I couldn't make the decision for myself, but I was like, why do I need a Gardasil vaccine? That's for girls, for cervical cancer. I'm still not sure. I don't even know, are they still pushing Gardasil nowadays? I'm not sure, but Gardasil for men. But yeah, no, I didn't even want to take the vaccine. So no, I'm not really big on taking medication at all. If I have a headache, I just sit in a dark room instead of taking Tylenol, that sort of thing. But that was the other thing. I was getting these extreme headaches. So, and it was kind of weird. It wasn't like extreme in pain, but they were just very localized. It's, oh no, I feel like it's coming in here. And then I just had this strange localized sharp pain, but it would come in different spots, all in my head, like at different times. It was not, it was always just one spot, and it was quite strange. So, the headaches went away, and I'll get a headache now, maybe if I drink too much, hungover, that sort of thing, I'll get a headache. But, or maybe I work with dogs. So, a lot of barking dogs all day, that'll give you a headache. So, for that sort of thing, yeah, I'll get a headache, but it's nothing like the headaches that I used to get. But yeah, I never took any medication. That was my feeling from the start. I was like, I'm not going to take any of their drugs because I don't want to. Not because I knew about the drugs and their potential side effects. I was like, why am I going to do what you tell me to do when you're not healthy yourself?
Yeah, fair enough. So you said you've been on all these diets all over the years. Was this all in an effort because this lack of speech that you had sounds like it was a transient problem that only happened a few times and then went away? Were there other chronic issues you were dealing with which caused you to continue to experiment with diets?
Yeah, my body wasn't in the best shape. So, I wrestled in high school, so I was able to cut down 10 pounds to get a free varsity spot to wrestle my first year as senior. That was cool. So I'm like, you can not eat to lose weight, but I did not feel good. I was eating, a packet of saltine crackers a day and running in winter gear in the pool room, like that sort of thing, just like sweating it out, like the good old, energy in versus input out, that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, that works, but it doesn't feel good. I'm like, how can I eat as much, because I love eating. I'm like, how can I eat possibly as much as I can without gaining any weight? And actually, I realized that I can lose weight while eating more food than the average person, especially with carnivore. I could eat, 3-4 pounds of meat, no problem. And it's like, I had problems keeping on weight. So I don't think I was eating enough, but I'm like 6'4", 185 now. And I'm not so strict on the carnivore. So I do kind of notice some things coming back. So I've had this ongoing tinea versicolor. I think that's how you say it, or tinea. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just kind of like, it's like a fungal rash. And so it's kind of funny because that's like my carb alarm, I call it. So I know I'm eating too many carbs when I start to see some random spots. I'm like, oh no, I better clean up my diet. And then I stop eating so many carbs and it goes away. So, little things like that I'll get, but no, I haven't experienced any neurological symptoms. And in fact, I've noticed cognitive increases. Like I can read faster and I can, comprehend complex topics that I wasn't able to comprehend before, no more brain fog. So basically the more meat I eat, the better I feel and the less strange, typical human symptoms that I have. But it was, I think that my biggest thing was trying to figure out what happened all those years. And that's what led me down this path. But yeah, as far as current symptoms, I mean, well, the other thing was so in 2023, I quit everything. And I'm like, I'm going the cleanest carnivore I can possibly do. So, no drinking, no weed smoking, no, anything. And I cut out all carbs completely. And so where was I going with this? The thing about that was I realized that the cleaner carnivore I eat, the less symptoms I have. But so I got myself to a really good spot. And this is where I was going. So I ended up getting bit by a tick because I got a dog. That was the other reason I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go out with my friends and get a week-old puppy, a Dutch Shepherd. So I'm like, I really need to focus on this dog. So that was a lot of the other reason why I stopped drinking because, I'm like, I don't need those. So I ended up getting bit by a tick, and I guess I didn't catch it in time. And so I'm sitting on the toilet one day, and I'm like, oh no, that looks like a red rash next to the tick bite. So I removed the tick, and so they tested me positive for Lyme. But the thing was, like, I didn't really notice anything with the. I mean, I was a little fatigued. It kind of felt like I had the flu, but I must have caught it within 48 hours. I took a round of Doxy, and that was it. I was experimenting. So I go into these like weird little rabbit holes, like high dose caffeine for treating Lyme disease. So I'm not sure how much that helped, but I don't think that it was anything other than my diet that made me just completely kick Lyme disease's ass. And I didn't really have any symptoms other than, like the rash went away after the round of Doxy. And then, so I was also living I didn't know at the time, but I was living in a house full of mold. So that didn't help. So I had the mold toxicity going on. I had the Lyme disease going on. And I mean, as far as like weird mold symptoms, I got the worst nosebleed I ever got. I was also experimenting with taking low dose aspirin, which I'm not doing anymore. So and I think the nosebleed started from the mold because that's some strange symptom of mold. You get nosebleeds, maybe your nose gets too dry. I don't know what happened, but it just would not clot because I was on the aspirin. So I stopped taking that since. But you have the mold toxicity plus all of my random experimentation with like things like that. So 2023 was an interesting year for me for sure. But I think that I got through it pretty much unscathed because I was eating such clean carnivore. I mean, I wasn't doing like the whole grass-fed thing at first. I was like, let's just buy 3 pounds of conventional meat from Aldi, cook it, and eat as much as I can. And like I was cracking eggs in there too. At the time, I was cracking like 3 eggs in there. And I wasn't even doing the whole meat and fruit thing because the first time I came on the podcast, we were talking about the meat and fruit carnivore, which I don't think it's carnivore. People like to say, oh, meat and fruit carnivore. Isn't carnivore just eating meat? And now they came out with this new thing called animal based, which is it's mostly carbs anyway. So I don't think that carbs are bad, but I think that too many carbs are bad. Like certainly too many carbs are bad. But I listened to your first episode of Rogan the other day because I'm like, let me refresh my ShawnBaker knowledge. And you were saying a similar thing. You were saying, it's kind of hard to find your ideal amount of carbs. Or, I might be putting words in your mouth here, but you might as well just go on carnivore so you don't have to worry about that. And I think that that's correct if that's what you're saying. But this is also like 2017, so I'm not holding you to anything. But I don't think that everyone needs to go carnivore, but I think the closer you get to carnivore, the better you're going to be. And so I've been experimenting with, I did the carnivore with fruit. I did the carnivore with no fruit and just vegetables. So that's what I was doing recently until I was like, okay, I'm just going to, you fall off the wagon. And, it's not the easiest thing to stay on the wagon. So
Let me ask you,
people fall off the wagon.
Hey folks, it's Dr. ShawnBaker here. Hey, if you or someone you love is suffering from chronic disease and you're tired of just managing symptoms with potions, pills, and procedures, I want you to check out Revero.com. Our team of dedicated professionals is committed to tackling the root cause of your issue and finally getting you healthy. Hurry up, though. Our spaces are filling up very quickly. Let me interrupt you here. You said you did it for a while with some fruit and some other. How did that do for you? Was it net positive, net negative? What was the result of that?
It was great. I think so the reason why I added the fruit back in was because I was getting these intense cramps, horrible, the worst cramps I've ever got. Like you could feel them in your, wherever you got them in your calf. Sometimes they would be in my forearm and you could feel them and you could try and push it in, massage it. It would not go away. And the only thing that did it was, like a spoonful of honey and then it would go away. And I'm like, wait, why does that work? So what do you think that was? I mean, and again, this is before the Lyme, but I was living in the mold house. So I'm not quite sure what those cramps were. And I think cramping is usually due to an electrolyte imbalance. So maybe I was putting too much salt, not enough salt. And I think that everyone's, magnesium deficient and I should probably be supplementing. But I don't even really like taking supplements. I just started the creatine, but that's because I'm like, okay, I haven't experimented with something in a while. So let's try creatine. It's pretty safe. So yeah, what do you think that those cramps could have been? And I was eating like 3 to 4 pounds of meat and eggs and nothing else. And this wasn't even during my raw milk phase, which that's another thing to get into.
Well, I mean, cramps are hard to, it's hard to get a lot of information because it's hard to study because they're so random. I mean, obviously there's some level of thought around electrolytes. I mean, we know muscle contractions depend on electrolytes. So calcium in particular, hard to say. I mean, if it helped, that's good. I mean, there's a lot of people that I see have cramps and, a lot of people buy supplement electrolytes or just eating more often takes care of it. It depends on activity. Sounds like maybe you're in a weight loss phase too. I often see that when people lose a lot of weight, they'll sometimes cramp. We see that like in the bodybuilding communities. A lot of people, as you get leaner and leaner for contests, they start to cramp for various reasons. And so sometimes adding back in extra calories in the form of whatever, carbohydrates, fat seems to help to mitigate that a little bit. What about, so you discovered this carnivore diet, decided to do it. What were the benefits that you achieved? Because it doesn't sound like you're still having the aphasia or the speech issues when you started this. Is that fair to say?
I wasn't. Yeah, those stopped a while ago, and I'm not quite sure what stopped those. I mean, this is why I think it was a vaccine thing. I think that it was totally separate from anything else, and I think that was caused by the vaccine. And all my other downstream health issues were caused by my diet. But I mean, again, I think that the vaccine injury was also caused by the bad diet. So sorry, what was your question?
So the question is, what do you feel that a carnivore diet has helped you with?
Well, I think it would be easier to say the things that it hasn't helped with. Honestly, like it's helped with my mood. It's helped with libido. It's helped with, I don't know, comprehension of complex topics, so all these different things. The only thing it really hasn't helped with is the tinea versicolor. And I mean, it has helped in the fact that when I eat more meat and less carbs, I don't get the tinea versicolor, but it hasn't solved it because it still comes back. So, I mean, I think that that's a separate issue, but I've taken, I forgot what it was. I think it was fluconazole. I've taken that a bunch of times, and yeah, that'll make it, quote, go away, but it's still there. So I don't think that that's an issue the diet can fix. I think that I don't know. Like I've been to a dermatologist like a few times, and she says the same thing every time. It's just some people have more of this yeast on their skin, and it looks like for you, the more carbs you eat, the more it's going to, show itself. So yeah, that's really the only thing it hasn't fixed. But other than that, it's fixed pretty much every single aspect of my life. I mean, how much can you attribute things to diet? I think It's mostly diet, honestly. So yeah, it's really, the carnivore is just the way to go. And then, yeah, you can add in a little bit of carbohydrates, but what is a little bit? Like, so my diet right now looks like, 4 eggs a day, and I have a pound of ground beef and 1 apple and cut up. I throw it in there with the ground beef, stew it a little bit. Yeah, I'll have, I split. So I have a dog. He's 60 pounds or so. So he's about a third of my weight. So I give him about a third of my food. So if I'm having 3 eggs, he'll get 1. That type of thing, and he'll get about like, nowadays he's probably getting a little bit more than I. So maybe he's getting like a half a pound of ground beef and apples mixture. Like, we'll eat it in the morning, and then that'll be his dinner later, like sort of late lunch type of thing. And then I'll come home and I'll make chicken tacos with a pound of chicken. And then, like maybe I'll cut up some cherry tomatoes, put that in there just because, it's nice for like extra flavor. I just kind of use like fruit and vegetables as like flavoring, I guess, like maybe I'll throw some blueberries in there, but sometimes I'll eat a lot of carbohydrates. Like last night, it was sweet potato, rice, some tomatoes. So yeah, like I'm sure if I were to look right now, I'd probably have some tinea versa color going on, but it happens that fast. So it's really like finding the amount of carbohydrates that does not cause any sort of strange symptoms. And that's really fine. I don't think that everybody is, they all want just like the easy way out, and, oh, give me the diet that'll work for me. And if you want, no input, just go carnivore, clean carnivore, eat meat, and that's it. Meat, eggs, some cheese, raw milk. Like I was saying, like the raw milk thing is interesting because that really I wasn't always lactose intolerant, but I developed some sort of lactose intolerance probably, maybe around, I don't know, like early 20s. And then like cheese wouldn't do it to me, but milk and yogurt, that would do it to me. But then I got into the whole, animal-based thing, and they're very into their raw milk. So I'm like, I'm going to give raw milk a try. It's probably not going to work for me, but I started drinking raw milk from a farm that I trust around me, and now I can drink milk. So I'm not sure if that was the raw milk that did that, or my body just changed around the time that I started drinking the raw milk. But, like raw milk is, yeah, sure, it's fat. It's probably mostly fat. I mean, fat, carbohydrates. Yeah, there's some protein in there, but it's all these different things. People say, oh, I want to live. I want to have, my whatever, carbohydrate they want. And I'm like, yeah, is that really living though? Is that just sort of like the more carbohydrate I eat, I find myself falling into this tendency of like other hedonistic behaviors, and so it's just like the less carbs I have, the less, I don't know, the less I want to drink alcohol, or the less I, want to, smoke weed or something like that, but it's just finding the right amount for you is something everyone can do. And I think that right amount is maybe I don't know, an apple a day, like the old saying, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. I've been eating a pound of ground beef and an apple for the past like 3 years, and I feel fantastic every time I do it. And so I just think that's the way to go. Find your amount of carbohydrates, but it's much lower than people think.
Yeah, there's probably like a minimum effective dose. And for some people, that dose is effectively 0. And for other people, maybe they can tolerate a little bit. And it's interesting that you point out that, when you do consume carbohydrates, it drives probably not only just your appetite for more food, but also these other things, smoking, drinking, other sort of maladaptive behaviors, which is interesting because I see a lot of people with various addictions. And when they go carnivore or zero carb, they often find that they're able to put those things into, they're able to sort of get over those addictions, which is quite interesting. Have there been significant downsides to a carnivore diet for you? Have there been any negatives that you've noticed?
Yeah, I guess the biggest downside is not being able to find meat in the grocery store. I mean, yeah, you could always find meat, but I try to buy organic, grass-fed whenever possible. And, I maybe it's not the right to do, but if it's on sale at the grocery store, I'm buying all of it. I mean, there's no limit. So, but then it gets kind of expensive, honestly. But in the grand scheme of things, yeah, the one individual item, a pound of ground beef, is expensive. It's, maybe like $8.50, $9 a pound, something like that at Stop and Shop. But I could be eating grass-fed, grass-finished. I don't think this is grass-finished. So yeah, I could be paying more. But in the grand scheme of things, like that's really all I eat. That's my breakfast. That takes me till dinner. So I eat pretty much 2 meals. So but how much is Chipotle? Chipotle is probably now, I don't know, I haven't been there in forever. It's probably like $20 for a bowl, something like that, a bowl and a drink, And so which one is cheaper? I think it's so expensive because I'm not buying Chipotle and stuff like that. I'm like, oh man, this is breaking my bank. But there are people out there buying Chipotle for lunch, and that's so much more. And especially when you're considering the downstream health effects of that. It's got seed oils and sugar and all this stuff that you don't want to eat. So you're going to be paying for it now, or you're going to be paying for it later with disease. I think that's the only outcome of eating processed food your entire life is chronic disease. I heard this quote once: if you eat the standard American food, you're going to end up with the standard American disease. And I think that's true. And I don't think that's just Americans. People just like to say the standard American diet, but I'm sure in India too, and like all these different countries. But I really think that the best thing is to just, I don't know, eat as clean as possible. And when I go and try and tell people about this, like close friends, like who are like rather intelligent, I tell them, about all these things, and they just kind of poo-poo it. They're like, oh, that's, you have to live, you have to, like, where's your pleasure? And I'm like, you don't understand. When you're eating all these processed foods, like your dopamine system, like we were talking about, it's all over the place. It's like it's up and it's down. And when they don't realize how good that they would feel on carnivore, and they wouldn't feel like they're missing out. Like me, when I'm just doing clean carnivore, which I'm probably going to start up again pretty soon, which is why I'm here back on this podcast talking about it. I'm looking to do the 100% carnivore again, but maybe tweak it a little bit, instead of going all meat and fruit, just, maybe a handful of blueberries, instead of, I'm going to eat a whole bag of frozen blueberries. That's kind of where I fall into, but it's really easy to do that. And people don't realize that because, they're eating all these processed foods that they think are food. And, they don't realize that they're going to be paying for it later. But that's preventable. And then, you tell them, hey, you can prevent all these chronic diseases by just eating, I used to tell people, oh, just eat one ingredient foods. But I don't think that that's correct. I mean, yeah, if you want to be healthier than, maybe 90% of the population, just eat one ingredient foods. But if those one ingredient foods consist of rice and sweet potatoes and, all these other carbs, then that's not ideal either. So yeah, I really just, if somebody wants, my elevator pitch, I don't know, eat your body weight in grams of protein a day, and that's all you really have to do, and the rest will just fall into place. If you're doing that, which I'm not even doing, it's kind of hard to do unless I would have to probably eat 2 pounds of meat a day, something like that. So it is easy to do, but yeah, then my food bill doubles. So I'm also, I'm working at a dog kennel over here. It's not really, I'm rolling in cash. So, but if somebody is rolling in cash, some of my friends are, like they're making good salaries, so they can afford grass-fed, grass-finished, organic ground beef and steak and, all these things. And so they can afford to eat their weight in grams of protein. So they just don't, I guess, because you know what? I think what really got me into this was because, maybe what's stopping them from getting into it is it doesn't hurt as much. And that's really what it is. And so when it hurts as much, they'll figure it out. And so that's where I was at. I'm like, well, quote, life sucks, so let's make it better. So maybe their life doesn't, whatever reason, maybe they don't have weird chronic issues. But I feel like that is down the road for everybody if you eat the standard American.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. I mean, if you just continue on a standard Western diet, most of us will succumb and develop, poor health. I mean, that's pretty clear, I think, for most people. And I think you're right that, a lot of people need pain to motivate them. It's got to be some source of discouragement. If you're like when I was a young kid, I mean, I could pretty much eat what I wanted, go out drinking, do all the silly stuff you do as young people, and generally didn't sort of impact me until I got later in life. And so eventually catches up to you. What you said you work with at a dog kennel, you have people that are around you. I mean, how do people receive your diet? Do they observe you eating lunch or family members? How's that been received with you doing this quote unquote kind of weird diet?
Well, that's what they think it is. They think it's weird. And I'm like, why? And I think they think that it's weird because that they were told. It's just kind of like, I don't want to say brainwashing, but it's kind of the concept, like your parents tell you what they think is right, but what they think is right was, like the food pyramid, which was a complete and utter scam. And so like, I don't think that they know that this information is out there to let you know that this is not weird. This is what we've been doing for, I don't know how long humans have been alive, but I know that there wasn't as much fruit or access to carbohydrates as there is now. And so we were probably eating, beer, it's that, and people like to think that this modern world that we're living in, I think that that's just life and that's how life always was. And they don't really think about, and, you bring up, like ancestral things and, their eyes just glaze over and they're like, oh, we're not cavemen. And, I'm kind of at the point where I've been trying for so long to get people into this. And, you just kind of like, just get beaten down after a while. I'm like, I guess I just don't care. I mean, I'll never be able to stop the caring, but, I've stopped sending people podcasts and I've stopped sending, like studies and articles and things like that, because they just don't respond to them. Like physically, like I won't get a text back, or they like are not responsive to it. They're like, oh, that sounds interesting. That's not for me though. I couldn't do that. And I don't know. I just can't help but have a David Goggins sort of attitude about it. It's I don't care at all that I think that I shouldn't do that, or I want to not do this, because honestly, if you think about it, it is really easy, but it's kind of not at the same time, because you're going against everything that all of your friends and family say and think. And that's, that's kind of hard sometimes, like going out to eat. I think restaurants are just legal drug dens. And so when I go out to eat now, I just think of it as, oh, this is just mouth pleasure. I'm just, doing drugs with my friends type of thing. But they think of it as nutrition, like I don't think if there's seed oils and food dye and things that's nutritive. But I have a completely different view on most things, not just diet, but, like diet specifically than anybody I know. And I just don't know where to find people that are into this as deeply as I am. You'll find like the kid who got me into keto in the first place, he was like, oh, just eat meat and cheese and you'll lose weight. Now he's poo-pooing the whole low carb thing. And, I just don't know where to go from here with trying to, quote, red pill people. Like sometimes, if we're using the Matrix analogy, sometimes I wish I took the blue pill and, it's okay, just go back to sleep and eat whatever you want. But I just couldn't ignore the fact that what I put into my body is going to lead me to a good outcome or a bad outcome. And I would rather just stick with the good outcome, because it's just, I feel so much better, and now that, I'm feeling better, I'm like, and, I started taking the creatine mostly because like my New Year's resolution was 100 push-ups a day. I only got to about day 2 at 190. And I'm like, you can't just start doing 100 push-ups a day. And, so now it's just, I just do push-ups whenever I want, that sort of thing. But I'm gaining a ridiculous amount of muscle. Maybe that's because of the creatine, or maybe it's because my body is just, it's getting enough protein, relatively speaking. And it's really easy for me to gain muscle. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. And then now I'm like, oh, maybe I'll get a gym membership. So, like the push-ups, like I used to not be able to do more than 5 at a time. So it would take me forever to get to 100. But now I can bang out 20, 25, like no problem. And, it's basically what I'm saying is like getting healthy leads you to healthier behaviors. And then that leads you to having a healthier mindset about everything in general, life, my social situations, relationships have improved. I think by changing your input. But the thing is, like, how do you get someone to realize that they want to change their input? That's kind of the hardest thing that I've gone through in this journey is, okay, I've got to this spot. I see other people in the same spot as me. And I'm like, I know how to get you out. Here's a lifeline. And they don't take it, and they kind of almost take it as an insult. They're like, oh, like, why are you judging me and what I eat, and all this stuff. I'm like, because I wish somebody told me when I first started, that type of thing. So it's really, you could say, oh, it's just being selfish, but really, I just want to help people. That's, I realize that I know things that other people don't know. And I'm like, here, look at this information. It's not just coming from me. Look at all these podcasts with all these credible doctors, and they're like, oh, like they just poo-poo it. So I just, that's the hardest part for me, is trying to, quote, wake people up. How would you think that, with this whole MAHA thing, it seems like people are gung-ho and ready to do this, but I've been trying this for so long that, I don't know, maybe with the whole MAHA movement now, people will all, wake themselves up and be like, oh, hey, look, RFK isn't a heretic, like he's actually talking about getting healthy. And I don't know why that's a bad thing or why that's controversial. And yeah, people can say what they want about RFK and his vaccines, but I don't think that they know what they're talking about when it comes to what he says with his vaccines. I think that they just parrot things that they've heard other people say, and it's not. But if you read his books, I read both his books, horrible, horrible books, but they're fantastic. But yeah, they're not an easy read, because it's, some of the stuff that goes on in this world is, it's a lot to deal with. And maybe people don't want to deal with this. And people have told me that. They're like, hey, I can't deal with this. This is too much for me. I have a job. But me personally, this is all I do. I put, they put you in a room full of, 20 to 30 dogs, and it's have at it. And so, you're allowed to listen to music or whatever. So I just choose to listen to podcasts. And so I listen to 90 to 120 podcasts a month on average, plus audiobooks, and all while I'm working. So I have the time to do this. Other people don't, because as soon as they get up, they're bombarded with Slack and, all this, work text and emails. And yeah, I get that they don't have time for it, but I do. And then you go and try and use your information that you've gained with the time that you spent, and they just poo-poo it. So it's kind of defeating.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, we just have a couple of minutes left, Matt. Any last minute bit of knowledge that you gained that you'd like to share to the general population?
Stay off processed food. It's really like you have to tell yourself that this stuff isn't food and start there. And that's really it. I just see Oreos as a form of poison that's not going to kill you as fast as arsenic will. And, maybe that's a harsh way to look at it, but going back to the, discovering David Goggins, I'm like, oh, this is my mindset. I get this. This is the way that I can do it. It's just that, that mindset of don't listen to the story that your brain is telling you, because you can think differently without it being heretical. You can do it. It's not like it's rocket science. All you do is change the things that you're eating. And I really think that we just need to start at the top with something like, RFK and, the MAHA movement. And I think we need to start with policies. Like, instead of subsidizing processed food, we need to subsidize even fruits and vegetables and meat. It really is. If you want, like my elevator pitch for, okay, what's the easiest thing that I can do to improve my health without really thinking about it? Eat one ingredient foods, one ingredient whole foods, and make different things with them. Learn to cook. That's the best thing that came out of my vegan year was I learned to cook, because you had to, because the stuff is gross unless you cook it. But carnivore too, you're gonna learn how to cook. But it's really that. It's just make your own food. Don't, go on Grubhub or, DoorDash or any of these things and just order something because it's convenient and it's easy and it's mouth pleasure. It's just, I think if people looked at things like pizza and, Oreos and Doritos and stuff like that as non-food items, like your body wants to be made of food, and you literally are what you eat. It sounds like a cliche, but you literally are. That's why glyphosate is bad for you, because you start to make yourself with glyphosate and your body doesn't like that. That's why Doritos, you start to make yourself with, all these like fake foods. And then, you just become this fake human. And I think that if we all, everybody was so divided during the election, but now it seems people are coming back together. And, instead of left or right or center, we're all on team human, and we need to start there. Help your neighbor become a better version of themselves so they can help their neighbor become a better version of themselves. And, then we can heal as a society. But I think in order to heal as a society, we need to heal as individuals to allow, our best selves to come through. And I really think that's where we start.
Yeah, I think it's a good sentiment. Yeah, I think we have to heal the individuals to heal the society. Thanks, Matt, for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you too, Shawn. Thanks for everything you do.